Okay, we'll give everyone a minute or so.
Cool. How's your day going?
Good. How about you?
Good. Beautiful blue skies here in Buffalo, New York. So enjoying it.
Ooh, it's actually cloudy right now here in California, so the tables have turned.
Right? Yeah. I'll take what we can get.
Okay, awesome. Well, welcome everyone to Commerce Unpacked. Today we're joined by Sean. He is the CEO and co-founder at Kickfurther. So Sean began his career in supply chain management and later grew a merchandising firm where he encountered the financing issues that would inspire founding Kickfurther. So Sean created Kickfurther to fund inventory for direct-to-consumer brands and major store brands like Target, Amazon, Aldi, and more. And in addition to running Kickfurther, Sean also works as an entrepreneur mentor at Rutgers Business School. So today, Sean's going to take us through some tips to optimize your end-to-end operations for supply chain success. So Sean, I will let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Krista. I'm going to go ahead and try and share my screen here. This was working before, so hopefully this works now as well. So hopefully everyone can see that. Looks good. Alrighty. Great. So thank you, ShipBob. Thank you, Krista, for putting this this webinar, this event on. The theme of today is going to be essentially planning. So you're going to see this come up like time and time again as we go through this presentation. And it's one of these situations where it doesn't matter until it really does. And then all of a sudden, you're gonna either have great success or you're gonna have big issues with your company, depending on how well you planned. It's almost like buying insurance, where when you do it and it's been done correctly, it can almost feel like a significant expenditure of your very limited entrepreneurial resources in the front end to do this right. But again, at the end, the issues that face product businesses in managing their supply chain, they will crop up. It's just a question of not if, but when. And so I highly recommend to all the entrepreneurs I work with that they get ahead of these issues and start, thinking about essentially contingency plans and redundancies for the various things that can happen within their supply chains. So what does that look like? Well, we're going to start the agenda. We're going to be talking about why end-to-end, some metrics you can track, some optimization best practices, a word about stockouts. I think everybody here knows how painful that can be. And then, a couple of slides about why we created Kickfurther and how we think that we can help product businesses scale. So let's start at the beginning. Why end-to-end? So when we talk about end-to-end, we're talking about the entire process of having a product produced, shipped to the US, right? Stored, fulfilled to an end customer, and again, planning for all of those costs entailed for running that entire process. So what I often see with entrepreneurs is like an idea where you'll see entrepreneurs, they'll think like, oh, I'll make it up once I get to scale, right? Like it's okay that I'm only making a 10% profit margin, but I'll make it up when I get to scale. And what actually happens is as you scale, what you find is that a lot of the costs of operating your business are scaling up as well. And so what you want to do is just have, again, a very good plan almost from when you start the business about how, as your business grows and evolves, you're going to address, essentially these bullet points that are on this page right here, right? So supply, demand, planning, and strategy is something that is an ongoing issue for every single product entrepreneur. I mean, the demand planning is very challenging. There's a ton of companies out there that can try and help you predict how much you're going to sell and what your demand in the future is going to look like. It's unless you're selling a niche product or anything that might be subject to regulatory concerns or something like that, that the fairest and most reasonable estimate on demand planning is what you did yesterday is most likely to inform what you did today. And obviously that's not perfect, if you've got a seasonal product or something else, right? But it gives you a decent picture, right? Unless you as the entrepreneur are doing something different in the demand generation for your business, right? You're running more ads or whatever else you might be doing. You shouldn't really expect that your demand should change, right? And so you can take that as kind of a baseline. Then what you'd want to do is add on any new demand things you're doing. I would recommend be as conservative as possible. It is better to have more demand than to have too much supply, right? Because having too much supply will actually end up incurring overhead costs and other costs for your business that will have to be carried until you can find the demand to meet it. So, be conservative with your demand planning estimates. Think concretely about what you are going to do and what those results will be for your business, and then plan to address them. Another common pitfall we see with entrepreneurs is they'll have some spike in growth and they'll say, wow, that was awesome. I sold 100 units last month and I sold 200 units this month. This is great. I'm going to sell 200 units forever, right? And then they start to plan for this new paradigm. But what they're not aware of is that the spike in sales, the 100 to 200 units, was not because they did something different, right? So it's not something they planned for. It was something that happened because a competitor stopped selling goods, or there was some event put on by some third party that everybody needed to buy their product for. So it's like things like that, where if you have an unexpected spike in demand, that can have impacts on your business, but you shouldn't project forward an ongoing spike in demand unless you reasonably can account for where that demand came from and understand how you're going to continue to generate that level of demand into the future. And this all relates to supply, of course, where we are as an inventory funder. We're thinking very carefully about how much inventory is appropriate to fund for any of the businesses that we work with, right? And so supply planning is just the opposite side of that, right? We're going to get into this later. We have a slide about it, but you don't want to end up in stock out situations, right? So to the extent possible, you just want to thread the needle, right? I said it's bad to have too much supply. It's also quite bad to have too little supply. To the extent possible, you probably want to have just a little bit more than the actual demand that you're going to have for your business. And again, it's not a science, it's more of an art, and it's something that you'll develop as you grow with your business. But creating expectations, creating assumptions around this, and then measuring your ability to predict these things as an entrepreneur in the early days, if you start doing that when you're young, right, you're going to be good at doing it when you're old. You don't want to be playing catch up with these kinds of things. So moving on from supply and demand planning and strategy, you're talking about procurement. So this is in managing, procurement, production, and manufacturing. Like, how are you getting your stuff made, right? Is it getting made here in the US? Is it getting made overseas? What are the lead times in shipping? What are the, what are any other impacts that might affect your timelines or availability of your inventory? So, classic things are like Chinese New Year, right? All of China shuts down for a month in February, and that happens every single year. And every single year, there are entrepreneurs that are caught unawares and expected to have inventory manufactured in February, and it doesn't even get started until March, right? So be aware of these things. This will, again, it's going to happen. So what you want to do is you also want to be aware of like different periods of increased demand. So you can think everybody's trying to manufacture inventory for the holiday season, right? So if you're trying to produce inventory right around August or September so that it's going to land in the US right ahead of the holidays, you're going to be encountering some of the more expensive production costs because that's very high in demand. And unless you negotiate with your factory appropriately, which I also recommend that you do, you also have some production risk where, if you're making shoes, right, and a shoe factory gets an immediate, urgent rush order from Nike, you might get deprioritized, right? Because that factory wants to win that Nike contract. they want to win Nike as a customer, you might get deprioritized. So that doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. And we saw this happen a ton during 2020, during the pandemic, on PPE and other types of private protective equipment, right? So when things go up in demand, factories are going to optimize for their bottom line as well. And that might mean that you, as one of the smaller entrepreneurs or line items, you might get deprioritized. Okay. So what can you do? How do you plan for that? Is you have redundancies in your supply chain. So again, this can feel like wasted effort. You've got a factory. They're awesome. They're always delivering on time. Why do you need to find another factory? Right? Because that factory isn't your business, right? And they don't owe you anything. And if you do get deprioritized, you want to have redundancies, right? So you want to have a second factory that's willing to step up and run the same production, that's already familiar with your products, that already has a product specification sheet. Hopefully, you've already done a sample order with them and ordered a few hundred units to verify that they can actually produce your units and your inventory at the quality and specifications that you need to deliver to your customers, right? So investing in supply chain redundancy and resiliency from the very beginning can yield dividends when there are some shocks to your business. Warehousing is very similar, right? If you have it's kind of like have all of your eggs in one basket, you can encounter challenges there. So one of the typical things that we see with warehousing is there's a transition period. A lot of businesses start where it's cheaper to just warehouse the inventory in their garage or their attic or somewhere else. And then when they go to switch at some point in their business life cycle, their business grows, they have increased success. All of a sudden, they're expected to be shipping 50 or 100 or 200 units out a day. And all of a sudden, their ability to manage and maintain their inventory in a garage or an attic or anything else is significantly impacted. And then they go to make the switch to a partner, a 3PL, like potentially ShipBob, right? Where ShipBob is going to charge storage costs and they're going to charge pack and pick fees. Like this is just standard for the way 3PLs operate. All 3PLs operate this way. And those entrepreneurs sometimes are caught by surprise because suddenly they have, multiple dollars per unit sold that they didn't account for in their original business model. And then they have to either go increase pricing, which can impact their demand, or they start losing money or not making as much money, or it impacts their margin. Whatever any of these number of downstream effects from not planning for that cost at the beginning can impact you significantly later on. So again, you plan for that, right? And even, I'm not saying it's a bad idea, make all the margin you can, right? If you can and you have the ability to store it in your attic or store it in your garage and ship it out of there, wonderful, do that, right? But pay yourself, right? Pay yourself the same amount that a 3PL would expect to be paid. Pay yourself pack and pick fees, pay yourself storage fees. These are costs that your businesses these are costs that you are incurring. And so you should be accounting for them. And eventually, if you hope to achieve the scale that I know all entrepreneurs hope to achieve, you will have to pay those costs, right? And it's not always just going to come from volume. So you have to make sure on a per unit basis, your unit costs are going to be supported by the price that you're selling your goods for. And that's something that's way better to discover early on, right? Like find that out when you're selling 100, 200 units a month. Don't scale your business up. Don't put years of your life into building a business only to find that at the moment of scale and at the moment of success, suddenly the costs have outstripped your ability to continue to grow your business. So the most successful entrepreneurs that I see, often it'll be on their second deal after they've encountered this, like somewhere on their first business they've run, right? They're accounting for these costs on the front end, even if they're not incurring those costs at the very beginning. So, that's warehousing, and that's also related to delivery and distribution, right? Whether it's shipping fees, pack and pick, whatever it is, depending on the type of business you're running, whether you're primarily wholesale, whether you're primarily e-commerce, delivery and distribution entails its own costs as well. It's one of these things that it's like super cheap at the very beginning when you're doing it yourself. It gets more expensive when you make the transition to a third-party servicing group. And then typically it gets cheaper again as you continue to build volume and scale, right? And as you're planning for your business, as you're thinking about your business end to end, it's a good idea to have these various stages planned out as well, and understand what the impacts to your business will be as you make these transitions for, pretty much all of these things, right? Like even procurement, production, and manufacturing. We often will see that entrepreneurs will start by working with a trading agent or an industrial designer or someone like that has manufacturing experience. And as they scale, they go direct to a factory. And then that creates nice economics for their business. So really across the distribution here, supply, demand planning, procurement, production, warehousing and delivery. And last but not least, after sales service and reverse logistics. So as great as your product is, pretty much all products experience some level of returns, and you're going to have to deal with customer service. These are costs that do scale up, right? As you have more customers, you have to perform more customer service. In the early days, it's great as a founder, as an entrepreneur. You can be directly connected to your clients. You can speak to them. You can perform that customer service, role. But eventually, again, if you achieve the scale I'm sure that you guys are targeting, what you're going to find is that it's going to outstrip your ability to do that as the founder. And you're going to want to account for how those costs get captured on the tail end as you scale up your business. So, the broad message here is try to create a plan on the early stages. Try and track all of these costs. You can find other people's models and other spreadsheets that kind of input your own assumptions into this so that you can have a reliable path to grow your business without as many, growth hiccups as you would otherwise experience. It's like, it's not going to be possible to do it completely, free and clear. Everybody's going to have issues at some point, but you can minimize that with appropriate planning. So some metrics to track for the businesses, some metrics that we track and that I think product entrepreneurs would want to track is cash conversion cycle. So how long does it take for you to turn your cash into goods and then turn it back into cash, right? The shorter that is, the faster you can turn your inventory. Typically, the better that is for you, the more capital efficient your product business can be. What's your production, your cycle times, fill rates, inventory turnover, perfect order rates. These are KPIs that you may want to track with your 3PL or your logistics partner. We briefly talked about inventory turnover, which is related to your cash conversion cycle. So all product businesses are built differently. KPIs, key performance indicators, what we call them at Kickfurther, are variable depending on your business, depending on how you measure success for your company. These are some to give you an idea. I also think that every product business should be tracking their COGS to retail margin. Even if you're a wholesale business, you should understand what is your product selling to the end user for, right? And what is that overall margin from what your all-in fully loaded COGS are. And the reason COGS is cost of goods sold. The reason you want to do that is because as you scale up your business, yes, your COGS can go down, but you want to essentially establish yourself, or at least some of the most successful entrepreneurs I've worked with in the last decade of funding inventory for entrepreneurs have had what we call the double on their margin. And what that means is if their cost is $1, their ultimate retail price to the end user is $4. So they double it once, right? That gives them a 50% wholesale margin. So if you are selling it to Target, right? You buy it for $1, you sell it to Target for $2. Great, you just made $1. Now Target can sell it for $4, and Target can make $2. And you, as the entrepreneur, can also sell it for $4 direct through your website, right? So understanding what the cost to the end consumer of your inventory is, and then making sure that you have enough margin, or you are tracking to have enough margin to make both wholesale and direct channels a possibility for your business is how I have seen entrepreneurs scale the most quickly. The reason for that is often because when you're going direct to consumer, that drives like all the profitability for your business because you're earning 65, 75% margins going direct to consumer, right? 75% if you're double. In the meantime, when you sell wholesale, you're going to be making way lower margins between 30 to 50%. 50% is usually good there. That's going to drive up your volume. And as your volume increases, all the other costs in your business should theoretically decrease, right? Like as you get volume through your total sales, you should be able to leverage that volume to negotiate lower rates with your factory, lower rates with your 3PL, lower rates with your freight forwarder, so on and so forth, right? It's just this, the economies of scale that we all know so well. So create a plan for your business, right? Identify what are the key metrics to track for your business. And then as you're growing the business, track those metrics, right? Stay on top of the numbers that are going to tell you whether or not you are successful or not. Some other good things to keep in mind as you're thinking about metrics to track are they forward looking or are they backwards looking, right? You want to have like a decent mix of metrics so that you can keep a pulse on your business. You don't want all of your metrics to be backwards looking, right? Like backwards looking things are how much did I sell last week? What did I earn last week? So on and so forth. You might want to be doing some forward looking metrics as well, right? How many ads were clicked on, right? And that gives you an idea of do I expect to see an increase in demand in the near future, right? So looking both ways from a point in time of where your business is, we think about KPIs as backwards looking, what happened in the past and how are we tracking to that? Current, present, snapshot in time. These can be things like current inventory levels, current cash on hand, those types of things that give you a snapshot of your business as it stands today. And then forward looking, right? Things that can predict, inventory on order, or other things that are going to predict what's going to happen for your business as time goes on, right? So those are just some ideas. Again, every business is unique. Track the metrics and the KPIs that make sense for your business. In terms of optimization best practices, this is stuff that, look, it's like we created this presentation to be relatively broad because what we've seen is that there are product entrepreneurs really at, all stages. And so creating a supply chain task force, that sounds really smart. If you're a solopreneur or it's just you and a co-founder and you have a very tight budget, maybe that's not super realistic, right? So what I would say is what you want to do is you want to do a proxy for the various best practices that you can, right? If you can't afford to create a supply chain task force, then spend an hour a week or have a supply chain meeting once a week or bi-weekly, right? Make it a topic so that you can stay on top of it. So these are just a few of the bullet points in terms of how entrepreneurs are typically successful. So what's a supply chain task force is a group that's looking at the supply chain and optimizing on the supply chain as their core job on an ongoing basis, right? And there are many, many, many different areas to optimize on your supply chain, from taking on more of the work and doing more of the organization yourself. A lot of businesses start by purchasing inventory on a DDP basis, right? Delivered, duty paid. So they talk to a factory and they're like, hey, tell me what the inventory is going to cost, right? Delivered to my warehouse in California. And then the factory will provide a quote. The entrepreneur pays that quote. The inventory gets delivered. They start selling it. They're happy. Okay. And that's great when you're getting started with a factory. The secret is that those factories aren't taking any risks, right? They're not taking any risks on any of the things that they're going to be doing for you to get that inventory from their factory all the way to your warehouse, right? And there's a whole bunch of steps. You've got to ship the, like earliest stage is called X works, right? On the factory floor. So from the factory floor, it has to go domestic freight, wherever your factory is, to a boat somewhere in some port, right? You have to clear export duty if there's any export costs or customs or anything that the local government requires, right? You have to get that inventory on board the boat. Then you need to pay for the boat to ship that inventory from wherever it is to wherever it needs to be. Then you have to do all of the import. You have to pay for, again, customs brokerage, duties, fees, whatever, right? All of that has to come back into the US, right? Primarily. At least for our customers, it's all in the US. And then from wherever the port is in the US, it has to then go from that port to your warehouse. Now, factories will do this all for you, right? But what they're going to do is they're going to take the highest watermark price for any of those intermediate services, right? Domestic freight, sea freight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're just going to charge you whatever the most that they might have to pay is. And if they can get it for cheaper, they're going to keep that as margin, right? Now, if you're just doing a few units and it doesn't make sense for you to have a supply chain task force, great. You pay an additional margin. The factory handles all of that and you're fine, right? You're going to grow your business a little bit with some knowledge that, hey, maybe my cost can come down if I do more of this work myself. By reviewing and visiting this question, right, and saying, hey, can I optimize on my supply chain? There are going to be times where it makes a ton of sense for your business to say, hey, maybe what I should do is get the inventory quoted on an FOB basis, right? And then I will manage the freight forwarder and I'll manage the customs brokerage and I'll manage the shipment from the port to my warehouse. And if you start doing that work, then you're able to get the lowest prices that you can negotiate, and you get to keep any margin that your factory was otherwise making, right? So that's an example, pretty typical that we see, right? As businesses hit that first level of scale, is going from a delivered duty paid ordering methodology to an FOB. And then as you continue to scale up, we even see businesses move to an ex-works, right? They're buying the inventory right off the factory floor. They're handling everything else. And any optimizations they're going to get accrue to their bottom line and their P&L. So visiting this question as your business scales up and understanding what are the costs you're paying and how they could accrue to you is what a supply chain task force can do. Use technology to streamline processes. I mean, this is like, I don't know, seems kind of obvious, but it's worth saying, like, we live in a world of technology. It gets better and better and better all the time. So where, you used to have paper and faxes and all of this stuff, like, you should be doing digital storage and cloud and doing the things that make your life easier as an entrepreneur, because if you're not doing it, your competitors will, right? And then those advantages will accrue to them. So there's always new and interesting technology coming out. We, Kickfurther, spend time building new technology to support product entrepreneurs all the time. And there's a lot of other companies that are out in market doing cool stuff. So whatever problems you're looking at, there probably is some technology out there that can help you. And obviously with the advent of AI and everything going on there, it's getting even crazier. So, keep your eyes open, keep your head on a swivel. There's always new and interesting solutions that can ultimately help you create a more efficient business, which is good for you as the entrepreneur. Tend to supplier relations is very similar to that supply chain task force. What I would say is that there's this level of building relationship management with your suppliers where, ultimately you're their client. And so they want to charge you the most and you want to pay them the least. And so there's some necessary tension in that relationship. But if you can build a really good, strong relationship with your supplier, if you become a trusted client of theirs, if it becomes a valued relationship of theirs, then it becomes much less likely that you're going to experience these other things, right? Your production isn't going to get bumped. If you get your supplier relations up to a really good place, you might even be able to get the supplier to offer you terms, right? Produce inventory, ship inventory ahead of payment or against a deposit, right? And any of those things that you can do, any of those little advantages that you can negotiate for your business, give you a little bit of a head start against other potential competitors within your market space. Inventory control is, like you should just have an idea. Where's your inventory? How are you tracking it? When are you going to stock out? How long does it take for it to arrive? From the time that you order, right? How long does it take for it to arrive, right? So if you know that it takes you 2 months for your inventory to arrive, and you're tracking your current inventory levels and you're tracking your average sales, right, then that should provide a really clear signal that you need to reorder inventory right when your average inventory levels are hitting that 2-month level on any one of your given SKUs, right? So managing that, staying ahead of it, and trying to prevent stockouts. And finally, check your logistics. So as with the rest of these optimization best practices, look for opportunities within your logistics that can include cost optimization or delivery optimization, right? Working with a partner that has many warehouses that can deliver and fulfill across your customer's geography in a normalized time frame, right? So a customer that's in New Jersey and a customer that's in California, both of them are able to get your product delivered in 48 hours, right? That's a great customer experience. It's not as good of a customer experience if, a customer in California has to wait 5 days to get to get a product, and a customer in New Jersey can get it the same day, right? You want to ideally create a situation where you're normalizing this for your customers and creating a brand identity that all of your customers can rely on in the long term. All right. So we talked briefly about this earlier, right? But what does a stock out mean? So this is kind of like the downside of failing to do appropriate supply and demand planning. So the impacts of stockouts are usually pretty hard to measure. I mean, some of them are really easy to measure. Is you stop making revenue, right? In most cases, the day you stop shipping products and the day you don't have products to ship, you can't sell them anymore. And so you stop earning revenue. The more pernicious part of that is that for a lot of product businesses, they rely on repeat customers. I think, for entrepreneurs here, I don't think I'm sharing anything groundbreaking when I say it's almost always cheaper to retain a customer than it is to sign a new one, right? And there's this big danger if you're selling soap or, like cosmetics or anything that's like kind of reusable, right? Where you see that your customers are coming back and ordering more. When you hit a stockout situation, you kind of drive your customers into the arms of your competitors, right? And then there's always some risk that once a customer starts buying a competing product, that they get comfortable with that experience and that they don't come back to your experience of buying your product. And so creating that moment for your clientele to start looking at alternatives, to the extent that you can not have that happen, you're just going to be able to retain your customers. You're going to see that the stats in your business and the business that you run they're going to look better, right? So there are some immediate costs to stockouts. There are some longer term costs to stockouts. There are also some costs to stockouts where this is not candidly my area of expertise, but I've heard this from entrepreneurs where once your inventory is out of stock, like you kind of lose your page ranking, right? And you lose your position in certain algorithms if your inventory hasn't been selling. And so there's like all of these costs that go into building a presence that can be significantly diminished if you are unable to fulfill against that presence that you've built. So, it's like, again, between having too much inventory and having too little, on any of the extremes, you're going to be in danger. But in general, it's better to have just a little bit too much inventory and avoid stockouts than it is to have a little bit too little inventory and end up in stockout situations. If you're within, some like margin of error within a couple of percent, you're probably okay, and you're probably running a pretty tight ship. So that's pretty good. How do you prevent stockouts? Well, going back to page 1, planning, demand planning, supply planning, understanding the metrics of your business, understanding how long it takes for you to get new inventory, and understand your supply chain, right? And understand that you have optionality. We see businesses do things like, for instance, they see that they have a stock out. They are not prepared to order a container load of inventory, so they pay a significantly higher margin to air freight, maybe a pallet or 2 pallets of goods. So they avoid a stock out situation, right? And air freight is super fast. You can get air freight done, if you're depending on your production cycle, they literally have planes coming across the ocean every single day, right? So you just book a slot, you can get inventory like really, really fast if there's inventory on hand available to ship. Sometimes, like I've seen it within a week, which is really crazy considering global logistics. So, be aware of your options. There's air freight, there are fast boats, and then there are slow boats, right? And ideally, what you want to do is you want to be shipping in quantity, full container loads on slow boats, because that's going to give you the absolute best cost that you can negotiate. But in situations where you are approaching a stock out and you're worried about potentially not being able to serve customers, it's often a fair trade to pay additional costs to bring that inventory in and avoid a stock out in order to continue to serve your customers and to maintain your position in the market. So don't break your bank. I'm a major advocate in fiscal discipline as a core entrepreneurial attribute, right? I think about this often as, you've got a certain amount of time. Money kind of buys you time, right? You've got a limited amount of money. And with your time, you have to learn. The more fiscally disciplined you are, the more you can stretch your money, the more you buy yourself time, the more you can learn, the more likely it is that you will succeed as an entrepreneur, right? So how are some ways that you can not break your bank? You can shrink it down, right? Like, this is the idea of, instead of ordering a huge load of inventory, you can order a smaller lot and you can turn it more often. Now, this will have the tail impacts of you don't get as many volume discounts, right? Like, so there's this trade-off. And for different product businesses, it'll make more sense to order more inventory in a lot to get the volume discounts associated with shipping a full container load, FCLs, as opposed to loose freight, right? Or being able to stock enough inventory so you can put it on the slow boat, as opposed to doing small inventory orders constantly being air freighted in to meet customer demand, right? So depending on the type of business you're running, right? Like, just think, air freight for a jewelry company that's selling rings is a lot cheaper than air freight for a piano company, right? So depending on your business, these things can mean different things, right? But one of the ideas is improving your inventory turns. Ordering smaller inventory lots, turning them more often, is going to be more capital efficient. It's going to reduce borrowing costs for your company, and it's going to make your business look better on a return on assets, which is which is something that investors will be looking at in an exit scenario.
Hey, Sean,
Well,
just giving you 2-minute warning. Just want to wrap
2-minute warning. All right, I think we're almost done here.
Okay, cool.
We're not that close to done, but okay, I'll speed it up. All right, so book your freight differently. Same thing I just said. You've got lots of different options. Air freight, fast boat, slow boat. Monitor your inventory levels. Get ahead of it. You don't want to be doing air freight if you don't have to. Understand what your customs costs are. Dial those in. Optimize for them. Understand that there are opportunities sometimes by just changing like your wrapping and other things to qualify for significant customs tax breaks. And there are customs brokers that you can talk to. Obviously, you want to cut down on your returns, and to the extent possible, outsource your fulfillment or, account for those costs so that your business is positioned to scale and you don't hit a hiccup when you get there eventually. Kickfurther, little plug about us. We are an inventory funding marketplace. We're not actually a lender. In that way, we believe that we're aligned with the clients we serve. The better experience you have funding through Kickfurther, the more likely it is you're going to stick with us, right? Obviously, we all live and die on repeat clients. So that's very much in our interests. So we pair product businesses with funders that are willing to buy the inventory. They place it on consignment. We find that we are very competitive on a cost basis. We'll fund anywhere from $20,000 up to, I mean, our biggest inventory run in a single lot was 1.3 million to date, but we are continually scaling that up. And our key difference is we're inventory on consignment. So there's no payment obligation up until the point that you sell the inventory. How it works is you provide Kickfurther with some data. You tell us about an estimated selling period. Your inventory is produced, shipped to you. As you sell through the inventory, you pay it back. And then once you complete one consignment, you're eligible to run multiple consignments on the platform. We fund at 100% COGS, avoid stockouts, lower your COGS if you're able to negotiate volume discounts with our funding, expand, do all these good things. Kickfurther is very friendly with other capital providers. Bala Bengals, one of our great clients, they funded over 1.6 million with us. We think that, I'm a product entrepreneur. I created the solution that I wish had existed when I was running my own product business. So our offer for anybody on the webinar is please sign up by the end of June, receive $1,000 off funding costs if you fund a supplier order by the end of June. And let me know if you have any questions or if anything else comes up.
Thanks so much, Sean. That was amazing. A lot of insightful info. Reminder, this will go out to everyone tomorrow as a recording. So if you want to revisit it, and if you have any other questions, be sure to reach out to Kickfurther. Thanks so much, Sean.
Thank you. Have a great one, Krista.
You too. Bye.
Bye.